What's up, everybody? Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have an album review, and needless to say, this one is definitely much anticipated amongst death metal fans pretty much across the U.S. I would say pretty much across the globe at this point.
Yeah.
Because we are going to go over the sophomore effort from Frozen Soul with their new album, Glacial Domination. This comes out on the 19th of May on Century Media Records. This band formed in 2018 in Fort Worth, Texas. This, again, is their second full-length overall. We're both big fans of Crypt Device. That was a hell of a debut. One could say it's had an Arctic stranglehold on me ever since. I know. I gotta throw that in there. And for those that don't know, this is Texas-size death metal, groove, riffs. It pummels you. It beats the hell out of you with a big old fucking chunk of fucking ice on a stick or something. I don't know. There's a lot of cold themes in here. This band has been called Cold Thrower before, and honestly, it's kind of accurate because this band loves Bolt Thrower, and they are very transparent about it. And well, we love Bolt Thrower, so I mean, pretty much we love Frozen Soul. So yeah, it was like kind of an easy one to get into, and we've been really anticipating this one because Crypt Device came out of nowhere for us, and absolutely loved us. We played the living shit out of it. We still play it a lot.
I played it yesterday, just not even actually thinking that the record came out today. I played it yesterday just thinking like, man, what a record. And I mean, still.
Yeah, and that's what kicked off our year that year. So they released another Frosty album in a warmer month, and yeah, we've been pretty much waiting for this one. And you know, kind of like leading up to it, we've had, you know, some insight on it. We knew that this one would be produced by Matt Heafy of Trivium, along with Jack Control doing the mastering. And once again, Daniel Schmuck. I hope your name isn't pronounced that. Maybe it's Schmook. I don't think it is. That doesn't sound much better either.
I feel for you.
Yeah, dude. I mean, high school must have been pretty rough. So this album opens with something that kind of pops up on here a lot with some really cool horror sense. It feels like you're watching the trailer to an 80s slasher flick, and then boom, it just explodes into Invisible Tormentor, and it's kind of fast. Like, it's a little bit more like up-tempo than you'd expect. Like, you know, D-beat, kind of thrashy riffs, but you get the good token groove to it, the big chugs, halftime breakdowns. It sounds nasty.
Yep. Lots more to the vocal dynamic, too. Yeah, in talking to Chad when he did Crypt Device, he said he was actually sick, which makes sense because there's not a lot of vocal dynamic to that record, but on this record, mostly, it's not only death growls, but he's got some higher register yells, and just his voice kind of fluctuates.
Yeah, and I would say the vocals are more prominent in the mix, or a little bit more out front, and he's got more, like, dramatic flair, especially to, like, the enunciation of certain words.
Yep.
I mean, 100%, I still think he sounds like Carl Willits, but I mean, this is Bolt Thrower kind of worship in a way, so that's not a bad person to sound like, because Carl's got a unique voice in death metal as well. But yeah, Chad sounds really prominent here, and this album kind of just builds on the foundation that Crypt Device, you know, kind of built there. You have all the token grooves, lots of Bolt Thrower worship in terms of like that double time sort of machine gun riff, very powerful fucking sound. And of course it mix that in with some like more old school brutal death like Suffocation, Broken Hope, maybe a little bit of Pyrexia in there too. Songs like Morbid Effigy, which actually features John Gallagher of Dying Fetus. That song is just single chug, palm muted fucking brutality. Like, it's just gross and groovy and violent.
Some downright slam riffs. While it is a tad faster in moments, it does focus pretty much on chug, done in a oftentimes halftime fashion. Just downright fucking meat and potatoes brutality.
It's gross. The video's fucking awesome.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, a nice little meat snowman out in the front lawn. That was absolutely wonderful to see that come together. And the last two tracks in particular, I think, really bring the brutality and like a few different nods to it. Abominable and Atomic Winter, there's some flat out like kind of doomy riffs to Abominable. Like, it takes on a more sinister, dark edge. It's a little bit more slow and brooding. In fact, Abominable has a really cool lead section where it kind of breaks into just like D-beat thrash. Like, the riffs get like nice and machine gunny. There's a real shreddy lead in there, and then right back to the groove, and then once again slowing it down to that pit churning sort of halftime almost hardcore meets death metal breakdown, done exceedingly well.
Yep. Atomic Winter does the same thing, although that song is just pure gut punch brutality. Nasty chug builds, slow, doomy, gross chugs with a brutal death breakdown. The token, I'd say, Frozen Soul sound.
Yeah, stankified, just gnarly as hell. Like, you're gonna make that, sour lemon face, and it's gonna freeze that way because this band's cold, because it's frosty. That was stupid. One of the things that I love about this band is, while there's a ton of bolt thrower worship, which, that's like a huge part of their sound, it's how they mix together that with like just some flat out old school brutal death metal. Death and Glory, which flat out sounds like a bolt thrower song title. Like,
yeah,
it really does. Like, I feel like that was like the banner that was like on the wall in bolt throwers like rehearsal space. Like, just remember, this is what we play for. It's like, we play for the death part. It's like, yes, we die on stage. But luckily they didn't. But yeah, this song, again, mixes up that bolt thrower groove, that double time, just like tank tread rolling over fucking corpses style bolt thrower groove with just brutal, nasty riffs. I like how the halftime section in here, like, it kind of rocks that bolt thrower riff, halftimes it, and then it transitions into a flat out slam riff at the end, and it's just disgusting. And I would say, like, in comparison to the first album, this album is notably a bit riffier. Like, this is more about catchy riffs, laid on the grooves. Like, it's kind of missing a little bit of the more brutal side of the band, which you definitely hear on the debut. But this one actually, I don't know, just kind of just lays on riffs, sticks to the groove, brings in some D beats, occasionally kind of break it up and speed it up. Like the first two tracks, Invisible Tormentor and Arsenal of War, which actually features Reese Alavi of Creeping Death helping out in vocals there, adding some extra brutality to the growls. I like the fact that, they kind of varied speeds a little bit and kind of, peppered in what I would say is like a touch more melody on this.
Actually, I think there's a lot more melody. From the middle of the record, from Glacial Domination, Frozen Soul, and Assimilator, they all kind of share almost like a mellow death vibe.
Yeah.
Very, very carcassy.
Honestly,
which I didn't expect to say for this band.
Yeah, there was a part on Frozen Soul where it literally reminded me of a very specific Carcass song. The Grain Landing Dark Satanic Mills off of Surgical Steel. Like, there's a similar flow, like where he starts doing the chorus and it's the number shout out. His vocal cadence is very similar to that, and plus the melody on top. Also, there's like lead melodies on there that are kind of similar to stuff that Bill Steer does.
Yeah, yep. And it's really noticeable. Like, both of us were sitting there going, wait a minute, Carcass!
Yeah, dude, my brain was like, oh, you've heard this. Like, it's not exactly on, but it's very similar to this. And it was like, fucking figure it out. Sift through all the goddamn death metal bands in your head. And he said it, and was like, that's fucking it. And I about had a stroke.
Yep, yeah, I thought he was going to stroke out. I thought that was the end for old Necrotic Nick.
Now, while this album definitely delivered on a lot of stuff that we love about this band, there are some issues with this that kind of hampers a little bit. The first thing we noticed was the mix. Matt Heafy produced this, and of course they got the same dudes that actually did the mix and mastering for Crypt of Ice, but the production overall has a way more clean, polished sound to it. And at least with Crypt of Ice, and of course the demo before that too, they had more grit to them. And there's a little bit like on the guitars, but they feel more compressed.
Yep.
The bass is kind of washed out, like it's there, like you can hear the bass in it, but you can't hear like individual notes really being hit very often.
It's there, but it's like, I don't want to say muted. It's muddy to the point of it's just there.
Again, with like really polished production, with certain bands, it works. This is not one of the bands I think I would want more polished production on because they kind of thrive in sounding raw and disgusting. Honestly, if you hear them live, I think that is pretty much the perfect way to hear them because it just sounds absolutely massive. Like there's not a lot of just, compression. Like you need a little bit of reverb. Like you get a little bit of reverb maybe on Chad's vocals every now and then. But for the most part, this is very tightly produced. And in terms of production, some production choices that kind of were cool at first and then got a bit much were the synths. There's a lot of horror synths on here.
8 tracks to be precise, actually. And don't get me wrong, horror synths are great in death metal. They appear in, I'd say, 90% of the bands we listen to. But I think it's best when they're used sparingly and not as the intro to every track. And furthermore, when they used them in Crypt of Ice, they had more of like a theme to them. It was more like icy, cold, whatever. And in this case, it's more just like watching an 80s slasher film, which isn't bad, but it appears on almost every track.
Yeah, like you get like snippets of a score to a John Carpenter flick, which, man, I love all of his scores, but here they feel kind of like interchangeable. The one where it really works is honestly Morbid Effigy, because that song is flat out brutal. It channels a little bit of Mortician to it. I mean, you have John Gallagher from Dying Fetus on it. Yeah, that's definitely the song where it works. In other songs, it just kind of feels like it's something that is sort of tagged on. The other element of atmosphere they have in here are like battle noises, which honestly, that works because that's kind of part of their theme. Like, you know, that's kind of part of the whole bull thrower thing, is war and death and all that cool fucking carnage. Atomic Winter and Arsenal of War both have like really good lead-ins with like, you know, guns going off, air raid signs, swords clanging together. That's atmosphere that actually fits. But there's a lot of it. And, you know, after a while, like, you know, you're kind of like, man, not every one of these songs really needs a moment like this. And then, well, I have some issues with some of the songs, honestly. The middle part of this album, namely Glacial Domination, Frozen Soul, the song, Assimilator, and Best Served Cold, all kind of get into this kind of cruise control mode. Like, this album opens up fast. You know, Death and Glory pretty much does their perfect balance of what they do, the bull thrower and the brutality. And then Morbid Effigy is just fucking disgusting, like one of the heaviest tracks on here. And then after Annihilation, which is a synthy interlude, you kind of get in this, like, cruise control.
Yeah, like Glacial Domination and Frozen Soul, the song, are both filled with like really triumphant melodies, and like the energy is just kind of, they both share almost the same formula where it starts off with just triumphant fucking melody and kind of a straightforward stomp, and then it'll kick to double time, and then it'll kick to half time, and then it'll go back to triumphant. Although the melodies are different and the chugs are a little bit different, the formula is the same, which doesn't really separate these two songs as being two separate songs.
Yeah, they really run together, namely because they kind of employ the same dynamics on each one.
Yeah.
You know, the melodies are slightly different, but a lot of them kind of have like kind of like an Amon Amarth sort of feel, but yeah, again, more like Bull Thrower. Like, it's still heavy and gritty, but the added bits of melody on there, you know, while it makes them sound triumphant, that is a little bit different for this band. You know, most of the time they're pretty damn brutal. The fact that they're kind of packed all together in one spot, like maybe if these tracks were moved around on this album, I think it might flow a little bit better. Best Served Cold does sort of, you know, break away from that. Like, it starts off at that, you know, double time Bull Thrower pace, and it starts to break out of that, get a little bit more brutal, and by the time you get to the last two tracks, it is on. Like, it is like some of the heaviest tracks in the entire album, honestly. But this middle point really kind of hampered the album, and it also kind of made me look at the rest of the album as a whole, where this band doesn't have like a lot of elements, like in terms of their sound, but what they do really well, and a lot of it is about the energy. Like, is this going to make you want to move? Is this going to make you want to fucking mosh and bang your head until it feels like your neck's full of gravel? And for the most part, yeah, like this album does do that, but I feel like, I don't know, like this album was bigger maybe in like scope in terms of like the producers and such, but in the overall sound of it, it kind of feels like a Frozen Soul album with, you know, maybe some of the calories removed. Like, it's, you know, missing a little bit more of that brutal edge in the pace that the first album had.
I wanted to get fat with this album, from high-calorie riffing, like 5 trips to the buffet, everything's covered in gravy, I feel like a dirty piece of shit.
Dripping off the plate.
Yeah, like, that's what I wanted, and while there are riffs in here, like, I felt like I got 2 trips to the buffet, and both plates were full of the same food, and I was just kind of, like, underwhelmed.
But overall, I mean, honestly, I still really enjoyed this. And, you know, that first album really set, like, a pretty high benchmark for me in terms of, like, yeah, this is going to be tough to match up to. And in a way, I think they kind of found, like, a weird balance in terms of, like, yeah, they definitely kind of did, like, almost the same kind of album, albeit it's a little bit different in some respects. It's a good album, but, you know, it doesn't quite match up with the first one, but in no way would I call this a sophomore slump. So overall, I'm going to give this 3.5 stars. I like this album. It's good. I think at certain points, it just plays it a little too safe. The inclusion of melody is nice, but honestly, it's not balanced out enough with all the brutality. Like, again, songs like Morbid Effigy, Abominable, and Atomic Winter are great. I gotta use some more songs like Death and Glory where you really get that awesome balance of just everything they do well. But in terms of things I think they did maybe a little bit better in here, I do like the riff work on here. Like, it is a little bit less primal, but there's more to it this time. And I think the triumphant melodies work. I just don't think packing them all together in one area of the album was probably the right choice there. The production needs to be dirtier for this style of death metal. Like, death metal thrives on grit. Like, if you can capture that live sound almost perfectly, like, that's generally the thing that just, death metal heads fucking absolutely love. Overall, the positives do outweigh the negatives for me on this one. Again, high hopes from the last one, but this is still a really good album. I urge you to check it out. If you're a big fan of Bullet Thrower, definitely. If you're a fan of, again, bands like, Creeping Death, Gate Creeper, shit like that, definitely check this out.
I'm also going to go with a 3.5. I like this band. I had very high hopes for this record, both in, again, my love for Crypt of Ice and in talking to Chad, and, there was a lot leading up to it. And this album definitely is not lackluster in the sense that it lacks riffs. There are riffs all over this record, just like there were on Crypt of Ice. I found a lot of riffs to be a little bit more hooky and a little bit more catchy. I do like the addition of the melody. I agree with Nick. I think it's definitely missing some grit, and in the fact that it's missing grit, it's also missing some heft. Whereas there are definitely chuggy riffs, they just don't quite hit as hard in most cases. The songs that are really great, Abominable, Atomic Winter, Death and Glory, Morbid Effigy, and even bits and pieces of Best Served Cold, because the breakdown on there is fucking sick. I did think that a lot of the songs, unfortunately, even though they did have riffs in them, sounded the same in the sense that they were overly formulaic, especially when you get down to the middle point of the record. I think maybe if you switch some of those tracks around, maybe ordered things a little bit differently, it would just flow a little bit better. The horror synths, once again, I said it before, I'll say it again, horror synths are great in metal, but not 8 tracks of them. They definitely know how to write riffs, they definitely know how to make things catchy, and I never stopped banging my head. It just didn't quite meet the mark for me like I thought it was gonna do. Still, overall, go out and check this record out. Definitely support this band. They are wonderful fucking people. They write killer fucking music. I really enjoyed it. It just didn't quite meet the mark.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there, as well as our store, which we will eventually get some stuff in there, but we're still kind of figuring out what the hell we're going to get. We also have a giveaway going on for when we hit 15,000 subscribers. I have a stack of 10 CDs I want to give away to a lucky metalhead. All you have to do is put a comment in the video link down below, which is also playing automatically on our channel, and you are entered. Once we hit the number, I will do a little announcement for it, and we will select a winner, and we'll be at 15,000 subscribers, which is absolutely surreal. But thank you guys so much for getting us here. You guys fucking mean the world to us. It is amazing to see this channel grow well beyond our expectations.
Well beyond our expectations.
And yeah, we got tons of stuff lined up for you. So once again, thank you all, and we will catch you later.